I got everything out of the retreat that I have at my favorite retreats. It lit me up. It charged my batteries. I felt like I got to restore. I felt like I got to center. I felt like I got to connect. I loved connecting with each person one-on-one as they wanted to. It just felt amazing. And it was a small group.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. Do you love the idea of running a retreat? This week's guest hosted her first retreat this year, and she's about to talk us through her process, from getting the idea during a meditation to planning it, filling it with participants, running it, and all the way to announcing her next retreat, which happens this fall. Meet Christa Harrison, founder of Healing for Queer Healers Retreats, where she holds space for fellow queer folks. Christa is a queer therapist in private practice in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, specializing in PTSD and trauma. She's a secular therapist in a sea of folks looking for someone they can feel safe with after religious trauma. Let's dive in with Christa. All right, Christa, let's jump into it. So, what made you know that you wanted to run a retreat in the first place?
Oh man, I don't think I had considered running a retreat at all. I don't like to look forward and plan something big, but I was actually in a really dark space, a really dark space. I do love retreats. I absolutely love retreats. They are healing for me. I've been to several different kinds, and there are a couple that I've felt even more peace and restoration than others. But I love retreats. I didn't plan to do one. Sounded like a lot of work. But just like most people in the pandemic, I had some really dark times. And honestly, this was born in my very darkest time. I had a partner for 3 years that I thought was going to be lifelong. And I have a son who's on the spectrum, he had autoimmune issues that flared up terribly in the fall of 2020 that we didn't even know he had. I was working with his doctor, getting DNA tests and all kinds of help, but he would be out for days at a time, like sleeping. And it was really scary because his body was not cooperating. And of course, the pandemic was terrifying. So we did everything we could to avoid it. We followed all the protocols. We were extra vigilant. And one day early November, my partner tells me, I'm not happy, I'm leaving, and moved out. Totally blindsided Connor and I. He didn't expect it. I didn't expect it. So she moved out, and a week later, Connor came down with symptoms, and we had the virus. We had COVID. And so we went through Thanksgiving alone, isolated with COVID. And as a mom, my worst nightmare in the world was for him to be sick like that on top of the autoimmune issues that were happening with his issues on the spectrum where his communication is very challenged. People can't tell. They don't know he doesn't understand and he doesn't share it. So, and he just turned 18. So if he went into the hospital in that time, most likely I wouldn't be able to be there to advocate for him because he just turned 18 and because of the pandemic situation. And I was terrified. Moment by moment was the scariest moments of my life. We were grieving and we were sick. And there was a day where his doctor said, I was in touch with his doctor regularly, and his doctor said, if his oxygen goes down one more point, take him to the ER. That was my worst nightmare. I just pictured that being the most traumatic thing possible for him. If he could make it through it, I couldn't imagine more trauma. So I was in the darkest spot, which is crazy because what I do whenever I get in really dark spots is I turn to meditation or meditational kind of things and really just try to center the best I know how. And so I was doing that. And one morning I woke up and I was like, I need to do this. I need it. I need to go to Osage Forest of Peace. It's a place here in Oklahoma that I'd been to for a yoga retreat that was one of them I just really loved. And I need to get some friends together because I love to connect people and I love to be connected with people. So I just had a vision and it was exciting. let's plan this. Let's go whenever it's safe. And I'll pattern it after a couple retreats I've been to the best I can and just bring my own personality to it and keep it simple. And it just felt so good to think about that. And I told a friend and they encouraged me. So while it was the darkest moment, that is where this was born. And it was out of a very authentic place. I don't know. I just felt like I could do it without any kind of need to do it or need to do it right. I felt like I could bring friends who I could feel like were safe for me. I was safe for them. I knew Osage Forest of Peace was restorative by itself. Just to get away and be there is powerful without any other things involved. So I just knew it felt right.
And you had no idea at this point when it would be possible to do it. You just knew, I want that. I need that like at the end of the tunnel as
Yeah,
soon as it's possible.
I was like, Obviously we can't do it right now. We can't do it right now. I don't know when we can do it. I'd love to talk to the people at Osage Forest of Peace, but what are we going to talk about? They're closed." So I had no idea, but I knew it lit me up and I knew it felt really good and I knew it felt right. I knew I wanted it to just be a few of us so it could be intimate. I wanted it to be safe for LGBT, trans, non-binary. That felt really important for secular people in Oklahoma. There's a lot of church camps, but there's not a lot of places we can go if we've had religious trauma or we're in the community where we feel safe. So that all felt really important. But yeah, I didn't really have a clue if it could come to be or how. It felt amazing to think about it.
Mm. And when you say I wanted to just be a few people, like how many people were you picturing at that point?
I thought 6 to 8 would be perfect. At that point, I thought 6 to 8 would be perfect or less, but not more.
Okay. And how similar is what you were picturing at that point to what ended up actually happening this summer?
I would say the feel of it was 100% on. I would say the initial idea of what it might look like in the bones of it and the feel of it were dead on. There were some changes that evolved. One is from working with you and the group, it did evolve from I want it to be queer affirming. I want to make sure there's space held for queer people and it be really safe. Two, I want it to be focused and specifically for queer people. I want this to be our space. We don't have a lot of that. And so I want it to just be for our community. It did end up being something where we added deep allies that felt important. There were people there who had kids who are in the community. There are people who are just really deep allies and very involved. And it also expanded from my thoughts of it being just a few friends or, okay, I can, let other people here in Oklahoma have this opportunity that I've had other places and it felt like such an amazing experience. Maybe I can invite some people here. And that expanded to national and large because of all the feedback I got that my mind was blown by the feedback and support and the craving and desire from people all over the place.
How did you start getting that feedback? Where were you hearing it from?
It started with our group. It started with it started with you and our group, and then it continued as I reached out to other people. There are a lot of colleagues I've met through working with you. The couple of times I've met with you to work with you, and so a lot of them just shared it with their audience, and I received so many responses from New York, California, Oregon, Washington, Massachusetts, just all over the place, Florida. I had no idea. I got so many inquiries and thank you for doing this. And I think there were even a couple of people from like Canada and Europe who said, I would so go if I was closer. So my mind was blown and you actually had encouraged me to consider it on a larger level because of the feedback, and it just made sense. I just continued to get feedback of, "Yes, we need this. If I can't come this time, keep me posted, I wanna come next time."
Yeah. And so, okay, so this whole next time thing started to develop. When was the first time you realized I'm doing this again?
Well, I think I'd thought about this could be something that is replicated because I thought this is going to feel so good to me. I want to do it again. I wasn't sure, but it really felt that way. And so I thought maybe yearly, maybe quarterly, maybe biannually, depending on how it goes. But yeah, as soon as I started getting that feedback, I reserved October. Like this was for June, and I reserved October with Osage Forest of Peace. We were ready to have a second one. And I've had people say, "Oh, I can't come to this one. I want to go to the next one. Let me know when the October one opens." And I've had people say, "I can't come in October, but let me know when the next one is. I'm dying to come or I'm dying to come back." So I have people asking to come for ones that I haven't planned. So yeah, it feels incredible. And there's an extra piece to that. Whenever I first reached out to Osage Forest of Peace, talked to the director. I knew the place was amazing. They have kind of an inner spiritual vibe and some meditational places, but they're also very affirming to anyone, atheist, agnostic. Anyone can go and be safe and not have anything pushed on them. It's just a safe place. And so I knew that. And so I reached out to the director. I told her what I was planning. And we talked for about an hour. And she was like, "Yeah, we can do this. That sounds good." And at the end of the call, she's like, "I'm just an old queer healer myself." So she's a therapist who I think is retired, but a director there, and she's told me many times since, "This is absolutely in line with the values of what we are doing here, and we want to support you now and long term. We want to continue to work with you. We absolutely are in alignment with these values and what you're doing with the queer community, with the trans and non-binary community." So that just solidified it for me of, yeah, this is it. This feels right.
Hmm. And you made this for queer healers in particular. When you're picturing like your friends and the folks you might do this with, do you just tend to be friends with healers, or where was it that you realized this should be for healers in particular?
There's a couple pieces to that. One is as a therapist in Oklahoma City with a private practice, I just didn't want to even consider the overlap of my clients potentially coming. And I do have a lot of queer clients. I'm a safe place for secular people and queer people, and they seek me out for that. So I didn't want an overlap. Also, in that really dark space, I knew that I was crashing, and I knew that the healers were holding space for both. We were going through the same things our clients were going through. It was so deep and difficult with the political issues, with the deep, deep issues that rose up in 2020. So I needed it, and I felt like, you know what, we've all got to need it. And I do have some connections with queer healers, but not very many. Well, maybe. I mean, a few of my closest ones, friends, but most of the people I know aren't. But
There's been like a very particular kind of trauma for healers throughout the pandemic. Absolutely.
yeah, and I just always, especially here in Oklahoma, we are such a red state. There's such a fundamental religious thing here. There's a lot of religious trauma and recent conversion therapy stuff still going on. So the safe place for queer people is small. It's really small. So that felt so important to hold space for an affirming place, but it just flipped into no, not just affirming. We're going to focus. This is going to be the focus. And even if deep allies want to come, they're welcome, but only if they have the understanding it's still focused all around the queer healers. And so this is a place for them as an ally to be an ally, but it won't be about their journey specifically.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things that I guess really sets apart when no matter what kind of oppression we're thinking about, like that's one of the things that sets apart an ally is they don't need it to be about them. They're like, yeah, I get
Yeah.
it. I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about the planning. What was that? Like there was the vision planning in that really difficult time for you where you saw the glimmer, you saw the vision. And then what was the more nitty-gritty planning like for you? When did it start and what was that process?
Yeah. So I still have a chalk board in front of me that has like the vision board version of it where it's got Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and just the basics, just, scribbled. But the nitty-gritty is why I came to you. The nitty-gritty is why I signed up, for your program, is to kind of work through that. I knew imposter syndrome would come through. I knew there'd be fear coming through, and I knew that I wouldn't follow through. I would not have followed through if I didn't go through that process and have the support I had when imposter syndrome came up. And the feedback of, absolutely, this is what we need.
Hmm. Hmm. So what were some of those pieces in like actually making it happen?
Setting up a website, getting the finances, like how to get paid for this, setting up what the fees might look like, what the paperwork looks like, what do people need to sign, that protects me and is clear to them and protects them. What's the refund policy? How do I do these things? How do I do these, I guess, the administrative parts, the business parts, the
Yeah, like all that stuff under the hood. There's so many things that you set up in terms of, like you said, payment processing and like all the stuff that becomes sort of when you're a participant at a retreat becomes kind of forgettable and like invisible. And when you're running a retreat is, it's all that stuff under the hood that you have to figure out.
yeah.
In a moment, we'll get back to Christa and how she created the retreat schedule and set up her website and other systems. First, I want to invite you to register for Create Your Program. That's the process that Christa has been talking about that helped her to create this retreat. This is a 5-week process to expand beyond private practice. You'll go from having an idea or even a bunch of ideas to actually launching your pilot program. This is a small group experience where you'll get a lot of brave work done in a supportive group of driven and open-hearted entrepreneurs like you. This is for you if you're a therapist or a healer and you want to expand your business. Go to rebeltherapist.me/create to learn more and register. If you're listening to this on the day it comes out in September 2021, we're about to close registration, and after that, the price will be going up next time. If you're listening to this in the future, don't worry, it's still worth more than it costs. Let's get back to Christa. So will you run us through what the schedule looked like? Like, what was the rough schedule of your entire retreat?
Yeah, the basic outline. Friday night there was check-in at 3 to 5, dinner at 5:30. That's the first time everybody got to be together. There was I call it a healing circle. There was an initial circle at 7. We did some brief introductions, who are you as a healer? And just a warming up. Oh, and one of the allies did a short guided meditation to start. And she's just amazing, such a soft voice, and really just began it with a softness and a slowing down. And then they were free to do what they want. They each had their own cabin, their own bathroom. All the meals were taken care of. They were communal. We got to sit and eat together, and a chef handled all of it. Saturday, they could do breakfast at leisure. They could go in and get some hot tea, get some coffee, get up really early and enjoy the grounds if that's their thing. They could get a plate and whatever worked for them. We had another healing circle at like 10 o'clock, and that one's probably the most deep healing journaling moment. So gave them some things to journal about, and then they went and separated to two people and talked about what they had came up with. They came back, and I just asked them what it was like to hear the journal prompt. What did it feel like in their body? And what did it feel like to share? What did it feel like to be the one who heard the other person share? And it was pretty simple, but at the same time, it was connecting, and it just felt good. So there was another small guided meditation at the end. They were free until lunch. Lunch was 12:30 together, and then they were free till dinner at 5:30. And during that free time, they had the option of purchasing additional services like spiritual companionship with the director, who was a queer healer who has been a therapist, who absolutely has zero desire to push anything and shared that she's really passionate about making it a safe place for queer people because she completely understands what we've been through. So there's just a freedom in that. And the people who went really loved it. I was kind of confused about how I would feel about that, but I opened it up in case somebody wanted it. And then some people paid for Reiki. We were going to do massages, but COVID got in the way of that, even though it was kind of a good time for a moment. But we didn't do the massage therapy, but they went to hike. They went to their rooms just to chill out in the air conditioning. They went on the labyrinth. They uh, they just got to choose from several things of what they wanted to do, but it was just their free time. So there were options, but it was just free. So there was dinner together, and then at 7 o'clock we had our next healing circle, which that was yin and restorative yoga. So we had somebody come in and just let us lay down on some props, guide us through some breathing and relaxing our body, and just helped unwind. And then they had free time. So once again, use it how you want. And then Sunday was our last day, and same thing with breakfast, leisure, do your thing. And we had our final circle, which was kind of a wrap up and a goodbye and takeaways. And then there was lunch together for anybody who wanted to stay for lunch and heading out. So the check in and lunch, the beginning and the end, I thought there'd be a lot less people. I thought people would come late and I thought people would leave early. And I was surprised that they didn't.
Mm.
But that was pretty much the outline.
Oh, it's nice. So you left a good amount of free time. I often hear from folks who run retreats that they wish they had left more free time because there's this kind of impulse for a lot of us to fill the time, like in the interest of offering value. And it's really valuable to have free time. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's where imposter syndrome came in and fear, because overall, this is how I wanted to do it and how I saw it and what felt best to me. But once in a while, that would pop up. And I'm glad I didn't attempt to add extra things.
Yeah. Okay, so that moment at the very beginning, you're there waiting for people to arrive. And the moment people start arriving, take us there. Like, what are you feeling? What are you experiencing?
Well, I'm lucky enough that this first round, I knew quite a few of the people. And so there was a safety in that. So while I'm waiting for people to arrive, I was nervous. But as soon as I saw people, each time I saw them, I'm a people person, so it lit me up. Each time, I was just happy to meet them and see them and excited. And I really felt this strange sense of centering and peace because it just felt like I don't know. It was weird. I didn't know what to expect, but the nerves just hit before and while I was waiting. And once people got there, it just shifted.
Mm, that's so cool. You just made me realize something, which is so I'm an introvert and I tend to get anxious around new people. And then once I'm working with them or know them in whatever way I know them, then I feel a lot of love and I feel a lot of connection. And I just realized when you were describing this that in my programs, I've got a questionnaire that people need to fill out before we start so that I know more about them. And it's mostly so that we can hit the ground running and I will know how I can help them best. But I just realized it also really helps me to feel like I know everybody before we start so that I have that feeling in the first group meeting of like, you're here and I already love you. That feeling. It's so helpful.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. And part of my first round was I did have several people I felt safe with, and I was a little more nervous around the people I hadn't met. But I have considered for the next round doing some kind of a Zoom with each person to do that if more people are brand new to me. Or yeah, that survey is a great idea. Something to know them a little better because I do think in the future ones it may be different for me.
Yes. Yeah. And so, like, thinking about how you can build that really safe feeling in for yourself.
Yeah, I had thought about it for them, and so I used a video to welcome them because I wanted them to feel like they had viewed me, and heard me and saw kind of who I am and my vibe and felt welcome, but I did not consider myself in that.
Yeah. God, I remember I heard Jennifer Loudon, who runs writing retreats. I heard her talking one time about how she runs retreats. And I remember her saying that she gives a lot of love to her participants. And I almost kind of like had to rewind it. I was like, are we allowed to do that? Like, are we allowed to say that? And that felt so good to me and so true to me of like, yeah, that's a huge part of what we are engaged in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's one of my gifts is just being warm, when there's a few people. I was the kid who went to camp and loved it, and I would invite everybody from all over the place to come with me, all my friends from anywhere else. "Come, be a part of this." I loved it, and so that lit me up, and I know that about myself. So, I just felt like this would be, like, me in my natural environment.
Yeah. And what was it like for you in terms of like you've been a participant at a lot of retreats, you believe in retreats, here you are in charge. What was it like in terms of your energy level, your stress level, feeling like any kind of, I don't know, stress during the retreat?
I definitely felt that at times before the retreat, like the preparation, and I had had warnings from other retreat leaders that, people think they're gonna go to the retreat and hold a retreat and get to experience it too. Be prepared that it won't be the same experience, and, there might be extra energy poured into people that you weren't expecting to on a one-on-one. Um, the behind the scenes tasks might be more than you expect. Things may take longer or be shorter. Be prepared to come in with extra or to shorten it. I'd heard all this advice, and it wasn't that way for me. It was not that way for me. I got everything out of the retreat that I have at my favorite retreats. It lit me up. It charged my batteries. I felt like I got to restore. I felt like I got to center. I felt like I got to connect. I loved connecting with each person one on one as they wanted to. It just felt amazing. And it was a small group. Osage Forest of Peace handled so much of the back side of it that I didn't have to. And I did have a couple allies that just, donated their time, one to give the guided meditations so I didn't have to do the thing I was a little uncomfortable with. And the other was for the yoga. And I didn't have to really do anything on that healing circle. So it really didn't feel like it took a lot of my energy. There is a time where I felt like I needed to go to my cabin, turn on the candles, play guitar for a minute, listen to my meditational music just to kind of really center before the final circle and the goodbyes. I did that on Saturday night. That felt important, but it still felt centering, healing, and wonderful. So it was important and needed to be able to do what I needed to do, but I didn't feel drained. I did not feel stressed. I did not feel on except in the very beginning and when people were showing up. And I probably felt a little of that in the first circle because I didn't know everybody and I wasn't sure how they'd respond. But seeing them sink into it, it just was, I don't know, it was just as good for me as it was for anybody.
That's
And I
so
was
great.
surprised and so grateful. Yes.
Yeah, this was really aligned with your superpowers, your zone of genius, and like what is like relatively easy for you.
Yes, and I have to give you credit. I have to give you credit. I would not have done this if I didn't take the time and give myself the gift of spending time with you and the group to do it. But also, a couple years ago, when I first started working with you, it was the superpower thing that drew me in. But I ended up doing the rebel therapist thing, and it started to kind of address my mindset issues as I started my private practice. And so I wanted to do something different than I'd witnessed here. I had nobody to pattern after, but I had a vision and I knew what I wanted it to feel like. And I created it and I fucking killed it. I killed it and I didn't know if I would. And I did not get support here, hardly at all. Even the most supportive people didn't believe it could be done. They don't see it here. And it's amazing. I love the clients I work with. I help fill other therapists' practices who I feel are safe and will give them the same thing I do. So I had that confidence of, okay, I've stepped out before. I knew what it felt like to want it and to have the vision and to feel like, well, nobody's going to buy into this, but I only need a few people to make it work. I need a few people like me who love it and want it and crave it. It's not for everybody, and that's okay. Everybody's not going to want to come, but I don't regret a penny that I've spent on any retreat. And I actually went through your New Year's thing where you just had a check in, and one of the questions you asked was, what is that thing that you just say, yeah, more of that? When you look back at the last year, what is that thing that you're like, yeah, more of that? And instantly I thought, I was scared to spend money on your program. I didn't really have my private practice up and running, but it was like, I'm going to invest because I really do want this to be different. And that's the first thing I thought of is, yeah, more of that. Investing into me and what I feel best about, even if it's scary. Some of it's money, some of it's time. Some of it's being able to get past my imposter syndrome of, I'm just this little therapist here who, right, is going into these conversations with people that I'm really inspired by, and I kind of feel I put them on a pedestal. Some of you guys in New York City and California and San Francisco. It's like, who am I to do that? But jumping in, just like the retreat, it just felt good and right, and everybody is welcoming and warm and helpful.
Mm. Well, that's so good to hear. That's so exciting. And so I'm all like, I'm just really verklempt by what you just said. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's just honest.
Thank you. So, what do you think will be different next time? Like when you look at that outline, what worked, what didn't work, is there anything that's going to be different in the next retreat?
My initial response is, no, it's awesome. I'm just going to repeat it. But actually, there are a couple tweaks. One thing I'm in the works of right now is, while I so appreciate the allies and what they were doing and helping with, and I would love to continue to incorporate that in some way, and that was beautiful. But one thing I'm working on is reaching out more to the queer community for services. So, like, I'm trying to talk to a massage therapist, a Reiki provider, perhaps a sound healer, a yoga instructor who are in the community. So, anybody who's trans, non binary, queer, bi, whatever under that umbrella, I would love to pay them well to come and offer those services. So, that's one thing I would like to incorporate next time. Another thing, I got feedback saying, the one thing I wish was different was I wish it was longer. I felt the same way. I was like, whoa, that went by so fast. I crave more of it. And so I might offer maybe a longer one once a year or something like that for people who've already attended one and know that they need longer. But also for this next one, I am working with the forest to consider and talk about allowing people to come a night early to decompress first or stay a night after. That works really well if people are flying in. That also works if people just want to. So that might be incorporated this time. We're talking about that. And since it'll be October and it's much better weather, we might do some of the things outdoors for COVID reasons. And for it's beautiful. So it might just really feel good to do that. Also, in Oklahoma, it's scorching in June, so it was hot, and it's snake season, and it's tick season, and we're right in the forest. So yeah, more outdoor activities are on the table, or at least being considered for October.
Tell us a nitty gritty thing here. What systems did you use in terms of like the online platforms you went for, the payment system, email systems, anything like that? And I'm asking because for folks who are thinking of following your footsteps and running a retreat with their own niche, that stuff can be intimidating.
Oh God, yeah. that was intimidating. And also what was intimidating is what you said earlier, the paperwork and the signatures, the liability. That was my biggest fear. But the nitty-gritty of that was Squarespace, one-stop shop. I created a very simple website. I did it myself. I was not thinking I could, but I played with it, and it was not bad. I had tried to do that for my private practice a couple years ago, and I'm usually quick to do these things and catch on, and I just couldn't. I don't know what was going on and what block happened, but this time it just came together really easily. I think I started with one page, and then I ended up with a second page. So it's very simple website through Squarespace, and I went with them to use Stripe through Squarespace. Stripe I'm familiar with from my private practice, so it didn't feel as intimidating, and it's built in, so that didn't feel bad. And then emails too. I just used Squarespace for that as well, and I tried to keep it as simple as I could as far as the formatting.
That's so great. So you were able to collect payments through just the Squarespace checkout system.
Yeah, and I didn't want when I registered people or when they registered, I didn't want to leave it open because I do wanna, like, minimize the spots. I did not wanna go over I didn't wanna go over 10. I thought, "That's my max. It's the amount of cabins we could do." And we ended up with 8 because a couple backed out, and I decided after that, that was perfect, and that's my new max. Anything else would have changed the feel. So, as far as that went, like, Squarespace, it was one of those things where I just decided to have a place where if they wanted to register, I had them apply. And the application wasn't like, "Oh, you've gotta be a certain thing to come." It was much more, "Hey, I wanna know you're wanting to come, and I'll send you the link to where you can go and pay." That way, I could filter and make sure there weren't too many people coming, and I just wanted to make sure they were safe, just have a tiny screening that they're safe, how do you relate to the queer community? Some people would say, I am queer. Some people are deep ally, and just share what connection they have. So that was something that was kind of a light screening, but
Mhm.
mostly my way of limiting it.
Yeah, and then the payment page was hidden, so you would give that to
Hmm.
them at that time. Okay, nice, simple. There's so many ways to do that, and so I just wanted people to get to hear the way that you landed on.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, most important question, when is your next retreat? How can people sign up? How can people get on your email list so that they know all about the process?
October 22nd through 24th, another Friday through Sunday. And healingforqueerhealers.com is the website. Just healingforqueerhealers.com. There is a place to sign up for my email list there. And when people sign up, they'll get a welcome, and then they will get an email notification when registration opens. And whenever it happened last time, it was sold out the first day, or it may have been 2 days. I was blown away. So yeah, I recommend the email because you'll know when registration opens, and there is such a limit and so much feedback of interest that you might want that email, or they might want that email if it's somebody you know who you think might be interested. And once you have the emails, like the welcome email, you can always respond to me and ask any questions or get in touch for anything. And actually, the email is Christa at healingforqueerhealers.com.
Thank you so much, Krista. This has been just such a delightful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored to be interviewed by you.
Now, I'm going to loop back and talk about some takeaways that really stand out to me from this conversation. Takeaway number 1, pay attention to your spirit and listen. Krista was caring for her spirit with meditation during a very painful time in her life when she received a clear message that she needed to create this retreat.
I turn to meditation or meditational kind of things and really just try to center the best I know how. And so I was doing that. And one morning I woke up and I was like, I need to do this. I need it.
Takeaway number 2, consider niching boldly and specifically. Krista's vision evolved from queer affirming to for queer people. Think about what bold and specific niching might mean for you.
there were some changes that evolved. One is from working with you and the group, it did evolve from I want it to be queer affirming. I want to make sure there's space held for queer people and it be really safe. Two, I want it to be focused and specifically for queer people. I want this to be our space. We don't have a lot of that.
Takeaway number 3. Christa fought the temptation to cram the retreat schedule full, and she found that people really valued their free time. Imposter syndrome sometimes tells us we need to provide more rather than allowing valuable time and space.
Yeah, and that's where imposter syndrome came in and fear, because overall, this is how I wanted to do it and how I saw it and what felt best to me. But once in a while, that would pop up. And I'm glad I didn't attempt to add extra things.
You can find out more about Christa and her retreat at healingforqueerhealers.com. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast. If you found this episode supportive, please do us a favor and share it with your favorite therapist or healer. That's how we reach more people. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. What stands out in terms of well, let me ask that differently. Cosmo, you're going to have to edit that beginning of that question.